G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here. Sunny day on the veranda again, and I'd like to make a response video to Mark of Archeosoup Productions relating to a video of his I've just seen, which is titled Archaeo-Scope, Bulldozing a National Monument. And the word on the left is Powys, P-O-W-Y-S. The one on the right is Mercia, M-E-R-C-I-A, by Archeosoup Productions. For those of my subs who are unfamiliar with Archeosoup, it's a channel run by Mark. He's a bearded Welshman who lives in Wall's End, which is kind of the border between England and Scotland, so he's a fair way off his home territory. And he's an archaeologist, and he's becoming successful making educational archaeological movies for the school system in Britain. And he's got students, and it's a good channel, and go and have a look at it. You'll find it in my subscriptions, you'll find it in my likes, you'll find it in my feed activity scroll. But anyway, this particular movie that I'm responding to, Mark, as I understand it, the story goes that once upon a time there was a Saxon king called Offa who was peeved at the behaviour of the Welsh. Therefore he dug a ditch pretty much along the border between what is now England and what is now Wales, and he had the ditch on the Welsh side and he had the pile of dirt on the English side. And it started at Prestatyn, which Mark says is where he grew up, and this ditch must have run through Wrexham, because Wrexham is where the liquid excreta has hit the rotary aerofoil device, and then it presumably runs more or less down to the Bristol Channel somewhere. And Mark says that it's pretty much an identical concept as the idea of Hadrian's Wall, you know, like a ditch, a dike. But the big thing is, whereas Hadrian's Wall has been removed for several miles at a stretch in several places, because Farmer Fred wanted to build a house or mend a road or fix a barn or some other use for the stone, but yet you can still walk along Hadrian's Wall, and everybody's heard of Hadrian's Wall. Well, apparently 15,000 people a year go to visit Offa's Dyke because it has equal stature. It's a worldwide national archaeological site because it's such a big ditch, and it happened so early, and it was hand done, and it worked. So anyway, in or around the Wrexham administered part of Offa's Dyke, what's apparently happened is that a member of the travelling community, you say, Mark, which is synonymous with what some people would call gypsies and what other peoples would call Romanies and other people would call the Rom, which pretty much is a nomadic culture which has clung to its traditional practices in Europe. So somebody who's of the travelling community, a gypsy, would consider all of mainland England or mainland Britain would be pretty much their territory. I mean, some of them might go to Wales, some might go to England, I suppose, but they might move around the landscape, and if the community was left undisturbed, you might expect their ancestor stories to have orally passed on the tradition of Offa's Dyke. It would be a reasonable expectation for a gypsy or a Rom in an intact community, I would have thought. You know, the sort of person who wants to tow a caravan behind a car and go from public camping ground to public camping ground their grandparents would have told them, oh yeah, over there that's Offa's Dyke, and over there's Hadrian's Wall, you know, some other place, some other spot. But didn't Margaret Thatcher start hammering the gypsies, and haven't the bureaucrats in London been trying to restrict the activities of gypsies and make it more and more and more difficult for them to live their lifestyle, so therefore they're starting to have to purchase land in order to have a camping ground somewhere that nobody can throw them off. So it's not beyond the bounds of possibility that somebody who has grown up in a traditional nomadic culture which has been disjointed and disarticulated and in an attempt to semi-officially dismantle the culture, he might not actually know that when he's buying this patch of land, it's got a chunk of Offa's Dyke going through it, and he wants the stables. So if he's got his own bulldozer and he's got his own dirt, and he's finally achieved what a lot of people see as being the dream of having your own title deed where you can do whatever you like, he may not be culturally up to speed on all of the pettifogging restrictions that apply to land owners. You know, I mean, you're not allowed just to stick a dam across any creek. You have to go through all sorts of paperwork hoops. You're not allowed to just clear a hillside. You may not be able to clear it at all depending on the slope or the species or this, that, all sorts of regulations that apply to people who own their own land, you know. And he may not be aware of any of that. So he may in good faith have gone out there with his bulldozer, and he may well in good faith thought that he was perfectly entitled on his own land to have bulldozed the high point and pushed it straight back into the ditch so that he could build his stables. And then of course the shit has hit the fan. And according to the movie of yours that I watched, Mark, the police have said that they can't charge him with anything because they can't prove criminal intent, because this bloke has a shadow of a doubt that he may actually be telling the truth. You know, he may not have known. And therefore the police have decided that they're not going to prosecute. Now, I would suggest, Mark, that you and your archaeologically inclined mates in Blighty start sending emails to whatever passes for your ombudsman. Maybe you've got a police oversight committee or something like that, because my understanding is that the role and duty and job of the police is to bring somebody before the court, lay the facts in front of the bench, and allow the judge or the magistrate or perhaps the jury to decide questions of guilt and innocence and motivation and mens rea and all that sort of stuff. What happens is it's not the policeman's job to judge the case or pass sentence, and if it's a difficult case, and if the prosecutor thinks that, oh, alack and alas, I might lose, tough shit. That's what the court system is for. In this particular case, where somebody claims ignorance as a defence for breaking the law, and I'm sure there's a law that says you're not allowed to take to an archaeological monument with a bulldozer. If they're claiming that ignorance is their defence, and if the police are accepting ignorance as a defence, why is it that every other court throughout the British Commonwealth of nations, and I'm sure in other places too, I'm sure Japan and America and France and places in South America are also dealing with cases where some individual, either genuinely or disingenuously, is going into court and saying, I didn't know there was a law against that. It is axiomatic that ignorance of the law is no defence against a charge of breaking the law. You're not allowed to beat your wife to death and then say to the cop, well, I didn't know I wasn't allowed to hit her. If you're arrested for gathering firewood on the roadside verge without a permit from the forestry department, waltzing into court and telling the judge, oh, I didn't know that I wasn't allowed to cut up trees on the side of the road. That won't work. So if it won't work for everything else in the civil and criminal code to claim that you're ignorant, why would it work for bulldozing a national monument? Okay, it is the duty and responsibility of the bulldozer operator, the person actually sitting in the seat pushing the levers, to ensure that the job they are doing is legally permitted on that location in that jurisdiction. So if it was Danny's own personal bulldozer and he was working on his own personal bit of dirt, it was his job to go into his local town council and say, oh, by the way, I'm going to build a stables over here beside my house. Is there anything I need to know about that ground before I take to it with a bulldozer and flatten the hill and push it into the ditch? Just on the faint remotest possibility that there might be something about the land that he needs to know about. Underground power cables, communication cables, sewer lines, water lines, gas lines. Decaying, mouldering old ammunition dumps, stockpiles of chemicals. There are any number of reasons why it's a clever idea to check at your local council before you attack what appears to be an overgrown lump in the dirt. All right, and I'm sure the local councillors would have said to him, oh no, you can't touch that, it's a monument. I have the feeling that Danny believes that if he just plays dumb, the cops can't be bothered doing the paperwork. And as you said, Mark, this case will set a precedent, because if Danny gets away with it because, oh, they can't prove criminal intent, then it's going to be just like your average sheep farmer or cow farmer in Australia who turns over a couple of handheld stone axe heads in their paddock and decides, well, I'm not going to tell anybody about this, because if I tell anybody about it, then, you know, somebody might make a land rights claim on my farm, which is absolutely legally impossible. But rather than educate themselves on what the law is, a lot of people will burn a scarred tree or bulldoze a sacred site or get rid of, plough up a bora ground rather than acknowledge the fact that it's there. And if some idiot in England is allowed to take to a bloody National Trust monument off his dyke with a bulldozer and the cop's not going to prosecute him, I say then you go to the Ombudsman and you have the police hauled through their review procedure for negligence and malfeasance and perhaps official corruption. Did the police officer want to keep his horse in the resulting stable that was going to go on the ground? I mean, you have to make life a bit hard for these police who only want to go to court when they think they're going to win. Sometimes it is the systemic duty of the police to take somebody into court in the sure and certain knowledge that they might well get off, but the fact that they've been taken to court will indicate to anybody else who's thinking about doing it that the paperwork is not worth going through, you know. Oh yes, well, you know, you can go out there and ring back an entire hillside full of trees and wait till the neighbours notice the trees have all gone brown, then they'll dob you into the Parks and Wildlife or the Forestry Commission, then they'll prosecute you, then you go to court and then you'll pay the fine. And there are people who actually calculate how much the fine will be versus how much commercial profit they can make by growing extra grass under the ringbark trees, running extra stock on it and shearing extra wool and selling it at the market. Some people will take on the fine as just a commercial factor in their decision. But certainly this bloke should be prosecuted, and if the police won't prosecute, they should be reported for corruption. That's what the police are for, is to ensure that the population understands that ignorance of the law is no excuse for breaking it. It doesn't work for murder, it doesn't work for assault, it doesn't work for rape, it doesn't work for theft, it doesn't work for arson. If somebody goes out there on a stinking hot day with a strong wind during a bushfire prohibition season, you're not allowed to light a fire, a total fire ban, and they say, oh, well, I didn't look at the TV, I didn't listen to the radio, I just decided I wanted to burn that pile of logs. they get fined, they get charged, they get prosecuted. Ignorance of the law is no excuse for breaking the law, and this bloke should be made an example of. Otherwise, well, it's carte blanche, isn't it? Open slather. Just blow it up, burn it, bulldoze it, say you didn't know. I reckon a suitable punishment, penalty, would be if the bloke who bulldozed it has to pay a team of archaeologists to supervise a bunch of archaeology students restoring the damaged section using period tools, being filmed for a documentary by the BBC to be broadcast nationwide and hopefully picked up internationally to demonstrate the individual consequences of bulldozing national monuments. And if it sends him broke, that is the purpose of the exercise, to dissuade other dickheads from selfishly destroying a monument. And if it was otherwise undisturbed, if the rest of the length of Offa's Dyke was pristine apart from the ravages of time, if nobody else had defiled it, then yeah, this guy should probably get, not only to pay the cost, he should pay another 100% on top as a fine to go to the National Trust to safeguard some other place. Those are my feelings on it, Mark. You asked for feedback. Sorry it went on so long. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Don't bulldoze the monuments. Ciao.